recording yet or not? All right. I'm going to call this meeting to order. It is the Finance Administration Committee and a special meeting of the Board of Directors. Today is November 16th. It's 11:35 in the morning, the year 2022. So again, calling this meeting to order, and let's determine if we have a quorum.
Absolutely. We'll start with Director Williams.
Here.
Director Deere.
Here.
Director Gray. Director Alvarez. And Chair Houston.
I'm here.
Okay, so it appears we have a quorum of 3 members for the committee, 2 members for the committee, and 3 members for the special board meeting.
Perfect. Thank you very much. And if you're not speaking, I would ask you to mute if at all possible, since we're getting some background noise here in the boardroom. Now going from there, do we have any public comment, Mr. General Manager?
We have no public comments here in the room, but let me check our online platform if there's anyone who would like to be recognized by raising their hand to make a public comment. I'm not seeing any hands raised, and so it appears that we have no public comment this morning.
Great, thank you. Any presentations?
No presentations on the calendar for today.
Okay. All right, so moving to the action calendar, we have 5A, which is the approval of minutes.
And we have our board secretary and manager of administration, Julie Matthews, who's ready to help us with that approval. Julie.
Thank you, Greg. Good afternoon, Chairman Houston, members of the board and committee. The item begins on page 3 of your packet for the approval of minutes. The minutes are a regular part of our process to capture the history and the action of the board meetings for the public as well as for our files. The following minutes have been attached for the board's consideration today. And it's the October 24th, 2022 regular board meeting minutes. And so we are asking for the committee to approve these minutes at this time.
Great, thank you. Any questions from Director Williams?
Nope. I would, we send this on to the board.
Okay, any other questions from directors?
Nope. Nope.
Okay, excellent. Thank you, Director Deere. So I concur with Director Williams. I have no questions, and I would recommend this goes to the full board for approval. All right, so we will move on to item 5B as in boy, our agenda management renewal.
Right, and we have Julie prepared to provide the report out here and also the recommendation.
Thank you again, Chairman Houston, members of the board and committee. This item begins on packet page 10, and this is our annual agenda management renewal. This is for our current license with Granicus LLC, and this agenda management system helps staff to prepare, edit, and approve staff reports so that we can bring timely reports to the board for their consideration. We've had this system since 2017 when it was initially launched. Prior to that, we did everything manually. So you'll see when we have our committee meetings, we're able to transfer the approved items to the board, either consent or the action calendar for easy access for the board. It's also a cloud-based system, and the system that we currently have, it allows us to work on the flow and the retention of information. It also eliminates some of the duplicate manual work that we were doing in the past. The recommendation is that the board would authorize the general manager to amend purchase order number 12500 for the renewal of the agenda management system license with Granicus for a period of 1 year beginning December 30th, 2022 and ending December 31st, 2023 in the amount of $57,242.61 for a not to exceed amount of $302,850.47.
Thank you. Any questions? Director Williams?
Sounds good to me. It's, the general manager, you're happy with this?
I am happy with this.
If you like it, I like it.
Okay,
So I recommend it moves on to the full board.
Great. Director Jeter, any questions?
I just think it's very expensive. Seems like a lot of money.
Yeah. Well, not cheap, but apparently it's good value because I do remember the old way.
Yeah.
And most people do use this system, Granicus.
You
Mhm.
do. And if I may share that this is one of the agenda management systems that 5 years ago, when we did the RFP and selecting of services, there are some that actually charge up to $200,000 per year. So the $57,000 is quite minimal for this cloud-based system that we currently have.
Director Deere. Can you hear us, Director? We're hearing a lot of noise.
Not for my-
Oh, there you go. Thank you. Thank you very much. Okay. So real fast. Yeah, you just want to say some of the other systems charge much more. Is that what you're saying, Julie?
Absolutely. This is a really good deal for what we get.
All right. Well, with that, I saw that, you already answered the question, the write-up. We've been using it since 2017, I think. So we've been doing it for quite a while. And I know it's been much more efficient for you all and also posting online to our system. So I support continuing with it. And so I know Director Williams said, let's move it to the board for approval. Right?
It also allows us to have the feature of capturing the minutes so that we can post on our website as well as audio and video recordings of the meeting. So that way the public, if they're not here, they can still participate or look at the videos that we post after the meeting.
Excellent. From everything I've seen, it's been very efficient. So with that, the committee, both of us say yes, move it forward to the board with recommendation of approval. Okay. All right, let's move on to item 5C as in cat, the request for interest rate waiver.
right, and we have our manager of finance, Mary Ann Rexborough, to give the report and recommendation for that item. Mary Ann, please.
Good morning, Chairman Houston, members of the board. Yes, I will be presenting on item 5C, which begins on page 12 of your packet. If you recall, staff came to you in September for a similar request where we had two banks who weren't able to meet the policy requirement for the interest rate as part of the small and community bank investment program. We did have another bank, One United Bank, this past month, who we reached out to. The investment with them was $1 million. They indicated they were not able to meet the interest rate per the policy. And so we did request that those funds be returned. They were received as of yesterday. But we do want to continue our relationship with One United. So we are asking that the board consider allowing the executive manager of finance to negotiate a reasonable rate with them. We've asked them to set up a meeting and they seem to be amenable to that. So we would like to request the board to allow the executive manager of finance to have that discussion. And just a point of reference, I know we talked about this before, but as you know, the interest rate through the overnight rate, I should say, with the Fed has gone up a number of times this past year. It started off at between 0 and 0.25% at the beginning of the year. And as of November the 2nd, which was the latest increase, we're at 3.75 to 4% is the range. So the effective rate is like 3.8%. And it is very high for some of these small banks to keep up with that level of increase. So we do want to have that.
Leave at the September board meeting or committee meeting to discuss just this item that's within the board policy to make that change. But we are planning to bring that policy modification for your consideration at the January 2023 Finance and Administration Committee. So until we have that board around that, we are still in the position where we need to request a rate from you. And so that is what is being asked today. And again, we understand that they are quite low in comparison to the thing there. We know that there were some parameters that was given to us the last time that we had there. So we'll use that as our starting point in that discussion with them. and hope that we can still see an investment with them in the future.
Okay. Dr. Williams, any questions, thoughts?
No questions. This is a board action, right?
Yes.
So the board action, if I could read the recommendation, or Marion, would you like
Yeah.
to?
Sure. That the board approve a waiver of interest rate requirement and allow the deputy treasurer to negotiate a report back at the next finance administration. meeting.
Support moving forward to the board.
Very good. By the way, I
Mr.
think.
Chair?
Yes.
Oh, thank you, Director Hughes. I just want to acknowledge I'm here. I was on the wrong code line. I had been waiting, but now I'm
Oh.
all right. So thank you. Thank you.
Oh, perfect.
Thank you.
Okay, yeah, I was just gonna note that you have joined us. Thank you, Director Gray. I'll just go ahead really quick, because first of all, I do understand this just basically is allowing you to talk to that bank and negotiate, bring it back to us. It's not even saying we approve whatever it is you potentially work out an agreement with them.
So as the policy is written, actually, I have the authority to actually go enter into that agreement with them. So it'd probably be done post fact, because again, we want to make sure that we continue that investment with them. But if you direct me otherwise to hold off on a decision there, the problem is that we know that there is anticipated to be another and 50 basis point increase in December. And then again, here are 2 more 25 basis points start of the new fiscal year. New calendar year. So again, we are in a position we're going to get further and further away from them. So we do want to acknowledge sort of what that is. But the way our policy reads today, it is 10 basis points within the Fed funds rate. And so again, the Fed is moving so much more quicker than I think the banks are able to do so. And so again, we talked about the spirit of the program. And so that's why the policy, I believe, is written in that way to be more quicker in sort of reacting to the sort of the market conditions that are out there.
Very good. I guess another question, because you said, was it this bank? Was it we just got $1 million in funds back,
Yes.
right?
So this particular investment was through the IntraFi network, and it was $1 million. It did mature last Thursday, and so as they indicated, they could not meet that requirement. So we did ask that they return the funds, which they did, and we of course said we would like to continue our discussion and see what we can do to continue our relationship. They first entered the program back in 2007, so they've been around with us a long time.
And then in the interim,
But the idea is that it's just sort of sitting in sort of a liquid fund until we are in a position to think that's there. Just to kind of put it out there, they were well below 1%, if you will. And so we felt that even if it's below 1%, other ones have been able to achieve above 1%. So we're hoping that we can find out the reasons why that they are still there. I did go onto the website to see, is it really true that it's, below 1? And so again, we want to see where it is and see, because they should be adjusting on their side just as much as, the other banks have. And so that's the conversation we want to have with them.
let me ask another question. If you get something that you find is reasonable and you make that decision, do you put the full $1 million in it, or do you put a smaller amount based on what they are willing to do?
So we've made those decisions in the past where if they haven't really been, so they're able to sort of concede, if you will, something on the rate, but not to a level that we're comfortable with. We have reduced their investment with us. And so we've done that with a couple banks in the past. And so we certainly could do that here because again, we want to make sure that we're doing right by our customers, our constituents, is to being the most effective in our rate that's out there. So if they give us a 0.5 when everybody else is giving us, well, a 150 or above, then, is that really doing well by our agency? And so we may reduce the amount of investment. And so we certainly can provide you context through the general manager's office to you to give you sort of some ideas where it is. But we don't know where they're going to be at. They certainly were understood the policy requirements that they couldn't meet it, they had to return it. But they do want to see how they continue to work with us. So with that sort of interest on their side, we want to certainly see how we can work with them, but it may not be at the same level as before.
I think,
And I'd like to clarify if I may.
okay, go ahead.
Yeah, and so if they were to come back with a 0.5, that's still below kind of the 1% target that
Right, so we
I
may,
believe the board had kind of established.
well, right, I mean, it was a comment made by Director Alvarez at a board meeting. He said, 6 months, at least 1%. And so, certainly that was helpful guidance to us. And we took that in and we were able to secure, interest rates that were above that percentage. And we are keeping it on the short end, knowing very well that the market continues to evolve. And as we heard, the Fed funds is continuing to increase over the next, 3 to 4 months. And so as a result of that, we want to keep that investment shorter term, if you will. So, because I mean, LAIF is at just under 2%, 1.96, I think I saw yesterday is their daily rate. California class is at a 3.83. So we know that the interest rates can be much higher. And so it's just a matter of balancing between sort of interest rate yield. We don't want to certainly chase yield, but we certainly want to get an effective yield. And we also want to make sure we keep to the spirit of the program of investing into our community. So we're trying to balance those things there. And so my guess is that they're not going to be able to go up much further. So our investment will be probably more minimal than we have in the past. And as their conditions change, we can certainly explore that with them.
But I think that it answers a lot of my questions. Although another one is, do you invest with them for, what's the term, a year?
So
Or
historically, we have done a year, but now we've been looking at 6-month terms just because of the fact that's there. You can even go down to a 270 days. So again, we'll ask him for a variety of things, but I don't think I would go beyond 6 months with them at this time. Just again, knowing that the Feds are looking at changing so much, if you will. And that's kind of a nice measure, if you will, where those bank investments are at.
And then I do think this is my last question, is that if we approve this, you not only have the ability to negotiate and make a decision, but that also allows you to decide on the amount you invest with them, right?
Yes, I mean, unless you'd like to give me some direction, again, happy to take your input, but certainly I certainly understand sort of the promise or the notion of what we're trying to accomplish here and what we still need to do for the district. And Mary and I have been talking too about the other policy considerations that we talked about back in September. And looking to present those options to you, which is looking at the overall investment in the program, knowing where our cash balances are today compared to where they have been historically. And so we will have another good discussion in January as it relates to this program.
No, I personally would like to give you all the latitude that you have, so it doesn't have to come back to the board. I'd rather hear the report say, here's what we got and here's what we decided, and comfortable with you making that decision. But obviously, if they can't be it to the level we would like them to be, I think you should look at definitely investing less with them, of course. And then what you figure out what to do with that other amount that's left over, how you reinvest it. That's another.
And again, we would probably most likely move it into like one of those investment pools. What I will say is the reason I really do like working with One United is that it's not just about doing loans within the community, but really educating their community. They are one of those, I'll say, disadvantaged area communities there. So they really do reach out to that particular group and try to educate them on the importance of an account as opposed to using check cash, all that stuff. So I think that they have done a really go above and beyond, if you will. And so we'll see where we can get with them on that. Again, we value their relationship. And as Marianne said, we've been with them for a number of years now.
Any other questions?
No, thank you.
Any other questions from the directors online?
No, thank you.
Great, thank you. So I would recommend that this moves forward to the board with a recommendation of approval, and Director Williams concurs. So thank you very much, Margaret. Next, we're moving into our information calendar. Item 6A.
Yes, so Mary Ann will give us our quarterly debt and swap report, so please.
Thank you, Greg, and I'm sorry you're gonna hear a lot from me today, but I'm asked Margaret to chime in whenever she has something to add to it, so you'll be hearing from both of us. All right, so I'm gonna start on page 14. This is your quarterly debt and swap report. Just want to point out a few highlights on this report. If I could ask you to turn to page 17. On page 17, you will find this is the summary of the outstanding debt as of September 30th, 2022. I want to point out on the outstanding principal that we have in that very last column, we have just under 187 million. That's down about 9 million from the last time we made this report back in June. And that's because we made our principal and interest payment as of August 1st. So that has decreased. I just wanted to point that out to you. As far as the remainder of the report, if I could ask you to just flip to page 19, I'm just going to go through these other considerations. We had no current funding opportunities during this last quarter. We continue to have our letter of credit that is set to expire in 2024, and we had no reportable conditions for the quarter. I'll pause there before moving on to the swap report if there's any questions on the debt report. Okay, so moving to page 20 of the report, this is your quarterly swap report. This again is through September 30th, 2022. You will see a comparison to June 30th of 22. Wanted to highlight that last line of numbers, the title of total mark-to-market value. You'll see we had a decrease, or actually it's sort of a positive because it was a negative number. So a positive change in that mark-to-market by 175,000. And with that, I'm going to maybe let Margaret say a few words about what's going on with the swap.
Yes, so certainly as we talked earlier today about the Fed funds increasing, that certainly has an impact onto the swap market as well. Certainly one of the reasons why we are seeing that sort of change, if you will, in the mark-to-market is as we approach our, if you will, the maturity date, which again is a number of years out, but as we approach that date, there's fewer and fewer sort of expected payments, if you will, as it relates to that thing. So that's one reason why you see that reduction. But the other is having to do about the interest rate. So again, we've seen such positive moves, if you will, in the interest rate of market, meaning the rates are changing. So if you will, when we are looking at our market, which is 65% of LIBOR, we are finding ourselves where we are fast approaching where this could be at a break even or even a positive position. So I wanted just to share with you that we have begun conversations with our municipal advisor, PFM, and their swap desk to understand sort of what are the steps that would be necessary if we are choose to be in a position to actually terminate this swap. So we could find ourselves, and we're monitoring this now on a monthly basis, and we can find ourselves in the near term looking at, is this a consideration that the board wants to take this exposure out for us? Again, that has sort of made a sort of a credit negative, if you will, as it relates to our credit rating reports with S&P and Moody's. But it is one of those items that is out there that if we are started to manage our debt here on our variable debt, certainly this could be a position where we could sort of de-risk our position, if you will, by removing the swap from our portfolio going forward. So we actually are scheduled to meet with PFM tomorrow morning just to have that conversation and see sort of what are the steps that are there. And it may involve some conversations. Certainly we'll have to include some conversations with our counterparty, which is Citi, and to find out, sort of where they are in that picture as well, and then work out the mechanics. And then we can bring that forth to you. So I don't believe this will be another update in December, but most likely in January, be in a better position to share with you sort of where we're at with this and what the steps are to move forward if that's a decision by the board. And we can certainly perhaps invite PFM maybe next month, if you like, to share sort of what that means of having a swap out there and what it means to terminate, and so that we can see where it is. And hopefully in the end, it's not a negative, but a positive. We can actually walk away with a few dollars in our pockets and but, again, we use this as a debt management tool, not as a sort of an investment, if you will. So, but we can certainly continue that conversation with you going forward.
So just to finish up the conversation, on page 21 are the details of the swap particulars that Margaret mentioned. The termination is in August of 27. You can see the other information about the swap there, but nothing has really changed other than the mark to market in this particular area. The next page, page 22, you'll see the notional amount outstanding. I think Margaret mentioned about as we go further along, we have less and less payments to make. One of the reasons also is because the notional amount is dropping as well. So you can see we're about 6.750 million outstanding as of today. And that concludes my report on swaps, and I'd happy to answer any questions.
Any questions? Thank you. Any questions out there? Thank you very much. I have no questions, so you can go on to the next portion. Oh, we're ready for the next item. Right. All right.
Please, Mary Ann, continue.
Yeah, go ahead. 6B.
Thank you. Okay, so 6B begins on page 23 of your packet. This is the fiscal year 22-23 first quarter budget versus actual results. So this month or this quarter, we did something a little different. We included a presentation to kind of walk through the numbers. But if you want to also look at the form that we've always included, that's also included in the packet. I believe that's on page 26. But
39.
sorry, 39. We're going to begin on page 26 of the presentation. All right. So I wanted to start off the same way we've, kind of historically start off with sort of an overview of where we stand. So on this page, you'll see we talk about our debt coverage, which is that bottom line there. For the first quarter ended 9/30/22, we landed at 1.91, which is pretty solid compared to a budget of 1.78. And just looking off to the far right, you'll see that annual budget. There is an asterisk there because I wanted to point out that during the first quarter, there were a couple of approvals to amend the budget. So that is also reflected in those numbers. The other thing just to point out for the net revenues for the first quarter, we ended up at 4.7 million compared to a budget of 4 million. So we are, if you will, in a favorable position of about 700,000. So yes.
Can you stop there? So just remind us, what is it, our target debt coverage ratio? What is that again?
That's 1.75. And if you recall, when we adopted the budget, we were actually at a 1.36. But with the amendments we made, that's why we're showing a 1.32.
Two in the annual budget, but our actual right now is 1.91.
As the first quarter, yes. And we'll walk through that.
Yeah, and if I could just add on to it. So yes, while we do have a written policy, it says 1.75. We did have that discussion during the budget to acknowledge the fact that we knew that we were going to be sort of out of policy in light of the conditions that we saw ourselves with, reduced sales, higher costs, and some of the other expectations there. And so that is something to watch and monitor as we look into our long-term planning for the district and as we sort of, see the evolution into the next sort of phase of projects, if you will. But again, it's something that we monitor there. And as you can see there, in the on page 39, we do project out where we anticipate items to be at the end of the fiscal year. However, I would say that it's too early to tell because of the fact that, we have only are dealing with 3 months and we've still got a majority of the year to go. So, and usually the first quarter always shows us a bit more favorable than where we would anticipate being at the end of the year.
Very good. Thank you.
All right, if we could then move on to the next page, we're going to highlight our operating revenues and our water sales. So one more slide, please. Okay, so this slide, again, try to break out the operating revenues, and you'll see that 7.4 million we talked about on the summary page. So I want to highlight just 2 items here. These are our potable water sales. We're below budget. And we'll go into some of the details on the next page as far as why that is. And our recycled water sales were also below budget. The other items, of course, not big dollars, but don't want to forget about them. We're doing well on our interest compared to what we budgeted. Water use efficiency, it's early, as Margaret mentioned, in the budget process. So there are programs out there that are underway. And as soon as we get that information, you'll see those numbers come in. And the other, well, those are just small things like the water harvest, the sponsorships and things like that. We may get money in, so that's included in that. But other than that, we are down on our overall operating revenues, 7.4 million. So if we could turn to the next page, we'll get into some of the details of why that is. So this first page, we're going to start off with our imported water sales. And I've broken this down between our retail and our barrier imported water sales. And so that first line of numbers, you'll see that we ended the quarter with 26,766 acre feet. That's compared to a budget of 30,196. So we're down about 3,400 acre feet in sales on our retail side. Likewise, on the barrier, our budget was about 1,675, and we had actual sales of just over 1,055. So you've been hearing over the last few months all the drought messaging. We've had a lot of conservation programs going on, and we're seeing that in these numbers here. In addition, I wanted to point out that in Denver, Metropolitan Water District did ask all of our service area and so of course that affected our sales as well. And overall, that was about 11.4% decrease we saw on the retail side. One other thing that you'll see is we are selling, and we'll get to the next slide, but I wanted to point it out. We had anticipated using a bit more retail water, potable water, because of a project that was scheduled for this year. That was the Chevron nitrification product tank. And that project isn't going through right now. So we added about 1,900 acre feet to the budget for that project, as we anticipated. We wouldn't be using recycled, we'd be using more potable. And with that project not going through, of course, we're going to anticipate seeing lesser sales on the potable side because of that.
That was on Chevron's side,
Yeah, Chevron nitrification.
their decision.
I don't know the decision it was included in our budget to have that project.
That's Chevron for now.
That was Chevron, and I think the guidance that we have from the board was to hold off projects that don't have yet financial commitments from the refineries themselves. And so that was, the primary reason why we held off. And so there was a window of time when the refinery would kind of have some maintenance work where we could have gone in and kind of piggyback. And so that time is come and gone. But we didn't get, a commitment from Chevron to, invest in that particular project.
We thought we were going to do that earlier when we budgeted, but it didn't come to fruition at this time. So.
Correct.
Okay.
Exactly. And then going to the next page, you will see then our recycled water sales to the refiners are higher. So if we could come to the following page, page 30. And this is your recycled water sales overall. We ended the quarter at 79.68 with a budget of about 92.90. We are under budget, but again, that top line, the refinery, you'll see that we are actually selling more water than we budgeted, which is great to see. But I did want to point out that's one of the reasons that we had anticipated selling less of the recycled water. And so on the barrier, you've heard the last few months what some of the reasons are, but I wanted to point out that LA County was doing a rehab of their wells. That project was supposed to be completed last fiscal year. It did run into this first quarter, so we weren't able to inject as much. They also had a leaking valve at their the north leg of their system, and so that did prevent us from injecting as well. But I understand from operations that we have been meeting our commitment to the county, so whatever they are asking for, we're able to supply to them. And I also understand that we are back at budget. Hopefully that'll continue through the rest of the year. Disinfected tertiary sales. My understanding is drought messaging also affects disinfected tertiary sales. I wouldn't think that, but apparently that is what I'm hearing. So you'll see that down for the first quarter. So I'll pause there. Is there any questions on any of the sales?
Any questions, Kathleen?
No, thank you.
That's good. two questions. One is with the county and the wells, still doing rehab on the wells that are continuing to affect our sales, or are they nearly wrapped up with that?
I'll have to look back with our staff to get that information back to you.
Okay. And then the other question is, actually, if you could, because it would be good for us to understand where the county's at with all those. I know the number of them in Manhattan Beach and Hermosa, I think, have been finished, but I don't know what the status is on other things, and obviously it impacts our sales. The disinfect tertiary, so that's an interesting one. So that's partly because with all the drought messaging and everything going out there, even people who use recycled water reduce the watering apparently
That's kind of
outdoors.
understanding. I did speak to Matt Vey just to get some information, and that was what we believe is happening. I'll look into it a little bit further. We do have a couple projects that are supposed to be starting, as you probably see in the EONO report every month. So those, once those start to come online, hopefully we'll see those sales also go up. But as Margaret said, it is early and it's the first quarter, but we'll continue to track all that information.
So it's an interesting quandary because, right, we push hard for people to reduce water use, but we do say with recycled, you can continue to run as normal. And so if there are customers that have reduced just because for whatever reason, but yes, it does actually impact what we're producing and selling, that's a bit of a challenge for us. So I think it would be good. I don't know how our staff outreach is to some of those customers, but hopefully the ones that are using recycled, like a golf course or a very large lawn, like at Honda or wherever, are understanding they can still water as normal. So is that something that you guys could look at?
Yeah, we can look at
Because
that.
if it's going to impact our water sales, I mean, obviously it's not helping us to a degree.
We're in that kind of business.
We're in that business.
The other thing we can do is certainly look at the trend information from year over year and also just in this one particular month and see if there's a particular customer
Yeah.
that seems to be reduced and get some more follow-up on that. So
Yeah.
we'll do a little bit more trend analysis on that.
Okay, because don't get me wrong, this is an awkward one, obviously, but we really want our recycle water customers to keep using it because that means less water is going to the ocean. That means that we continue to make our sales, but also you could add into it the messaging on that property that we're doing our part by using recycled water. So it might actually transition to a win-win in some way, shape, or form. So it's something to think about, but we want to make sure that the recycled water customers, number one, understand you guys don't have to reduce the consumption in these emergencies. Because what's going to happen in the summer when it's really dry? Are they going to, knock it down a lot again too? And that's what we're trying to encourage them to do is to use water from this recycled. So obviously we have to figure out the right balance, but our goal is to increase recycled water sales here. So I think that needs to be, look at the trends, see where some customers may have reduced because they didn't quite understand the situation potentially. I don't know. If we don't ask, we don't know. So I would ask you all to check that out.
Absolutely.
And moving on to page 31, this particular slide just gives a little bit more detail about each of the types of sales we have. You typically would see this in a separate quarterly report that we would submit, but we thought, let's just make it all in one rather than having it bounce from one report to the other. So we're including it here. So again, this just includes the detail of each of the line items. You can see Chevron boiler fee, what's low pressure, high pressure, and so forth. So kind of follow the numbers that I was mentioning earlier. You'll see like on that third row, when we talk about Chevron nitrification and the product tank and that project not being done, you can see where we're over what we anticipate in the budget. And you can also see moving down like under the barrier where we're under the budget. And so it just gives you a little bit more detail. But again, this is just so we don't have that extra report. I wanted to keep it all in one area. All right, so moving on to the next area, which would be your operating expenditures. As you recall, when we were looking at the summary, we said that we were 7.9 million below budget on our expenditures. So I wanted to share with you some of the reasons why we're under the budget. So starting from the top line, imported water purchases, as I mentioned earlier, with us not selling as much imported water, we're not buying as much. So you'll see that number is down about 11.6%. And then under the recycled operations, I do have another slide that will get more into detail. But we are down in our expenditures, about 2 million or 14.7%. And as I said, we'll talk about that a little bit later. The other item wanted to point out was on the technical planning. You'll see that we had a budget of about $1,000,001 and we're at 57,000. That really has to do with the timing of projects. And I don't know if Margaret or Greg, you want to add anything about those projects that are happening over the technical planning side. Otherwise, I'd be happy to point out a few.
Well, I certainly know there's been a lot of discussion, and I know Greg has been going out and doing a bunch of conversations with the Metropolitan Water District, City of Los Angeles. And so, and we've been meeting on a bi-weekly basis to talk about just our relationships with our refineries and our customers. And so certainly as we having initial sort of anticipation during the budget, I think we had planned around certain projects to occur. That it was on the planning side. There's also one on cost of service. And with that, maybe Greg, if you wanted to share some updates from your side.
Sure, absolutely. So the cost of service study, we advertised the RFP now, and we're looking to bring on a team to help us evaluate, the way we set our rates and to help the board craft a rate setting policy that we can use going forward, as well as software tools that can help make it easier for us to calculate and do all the analysis that needs to be done. And so we anticipate the bid on that closing, I think it's December 15th.
Correct.
We initially had December 1st, but we had a request from the responders if we can get a little more time, so we're allowing for that. So now it'll close on December 15th. And we'll bring, after we've done all the proposal reviews, interviews, we'll bring that to the board for recommendation for approval in January.
Does that come to this committee? Or
We'll come back to this committee.
This committee. When that comes back, it'll be this committee in January.
In January.
For the board.
And it will go to the full board. Yes, exactly. So that's in place. The other items that you were alluding to is our technical planning work. And so we're working with Metropolitan Water District and certain studies. We're partnering with Water Replenishment District to do certain studies. We're also in discussions with the City of Los Angeles on, we've had the membrane bioreactor pilot agreement, which expired December last year. And so we're looking at options to extend that agreement, actually put it back into place and to continue to participate in that project that they are continuing to work on. Then also potentially some other studies that we could do in partnership with the City of Los Angeles as well. So that'll help us move everything forward towards more use of recycled water and more groundwater as well.
Question?
So thank you.
One question on that note, in the, if you will, we've saved money, obviously, because we've got a lot of things that are kind of in a holding pattern, but that agreement on the membranes with
MPR.
Los Angeles, right? And we do technically, I think, potentially owe them some money or something if we want to move forward. Is that part of this, or was that in a different?
So we actually we did receive that invoice prior to the end of last fiscal year. And so it was recorded in last fiscal year. It just has not been paid yet as the conversation continues on with Greg and his counterparts. And then there will be, depending upon what the amendment shows, the balance would then come out of this year's a budget. And so, so if it's more or less, that will be a conversation that will be shared when they're ready to present that amendment.
So is it reflected in this savings?
So right now, there was an anticipation of about $2.7 million that would be an additional amount that's there. I don't want to speak for Greg, but I understand that it could be less than that number. And so if that's the case, then we'll see it there. So from a quarter perspective, yes, you're seeing quote some savings here, but that would, again, we do anticipate that there'll be something at the end of the fiscal year, and that's therefore the savings won't be as great, if you will, at the end of the year.
Okay. Great. All right. I think I have any other questions on this one right now. So go on to the next.
Okay, so moving on to page 34. As I mentioned earlier, with our combining the two reports, the budget versus actual with the treatment plant report, this is the more detailed numbers behind the recycling operations. As I mentioned earlier, we're at a $2 million positive, if you will, favorable variance. There's a couple of items I just wanted to highlight there. We do have, if you will, a favorable variance on our contract operations. If you recall in the budget, there's two contractors that we use, Veolia and Inframark, so they're both included in that number. I understand the reason that we do see a favorable variance is we do have certain positions that are open right now. They're also working on some CIP related projects, so maybe time, the way they allocate their time can be different than what we anticipated. And then moving down to the utilities, you'll see there's a small negative there. As I mentioned earlier, we are buying potable water still to blend in some areas, particularly at the for Marathon. So those dollars to purchase the potable water are included under the utilities here. And then moving down, we have our solids management, again, positive variance or favorable variance. Part of it is we do have less sales, as I mentioned, about 14% less in our sales, but also when you're blending potable water, you have less solids too. So there's a favorable mix in that. And then the facility maintenance, we do see some savings there as well. Again, it could be just timing, as Margaret mentioned, we're early in the year, but it could be also, we do have some positions that are open, so maybe certain things are not just moving along as quickly. And last but not least, on the chemicals, I want to point out, because that is a large variance, a positive variance. And as I said in the beginning, we did have two authorizations to amend the budget, and both of them had to do with chemicals. So with the number that are reflected here includes that additional dollars. Yeah. And of course, some of those expenditures haven't occurred yet. So we'll see that as we go along through the year. Don't know what'll happen, but I'm assuming that there probably won't be as a favorable variance as we move on through the years.
And maybe part of the context here also might be the water quality coming into the plant is improving. So we're getting less solids in the raw source. And so that means the application of chemicals also can be a little bit lower. And that may also impact the solids management as well.
Is that right? Because I was gonna ask about the solids management, the cost right now is less, that.
Right. And so if you have less solids coming into the plant, so that's less that we need to handle and remove and then ultimately transport.
I was thinking that or we weren't quite back up to normal production.
Well, part of it's going to be volume based. Yeah. And one of the questions I had for the finance team was whether our unit cost of operating is also in line with what we budgeted. And I think, Mary Ann, your answer was yes, it is in line about $1,400 per acre foot.
I think we budgeted $14.69 per acre foot through the first quarter. I think we ended up at $14.61. It's in my memo, so I just want to double check.
Yeah, so we're fairly close. 1461 would be slightly lower. So it seems like we're maybe operating a little bit at a lower unit cost.
Yeah.
If I understand that correctly.
Yeah. Yes, those are the right numbers. Yes, we are.
Around 14.
Yes, through the first quarter.
First quarter. Right, so reduced volume, reduced solids coming in are, resulting in the variances that you're asking about.
Any questions there?
No, thank you.
And just to keep in mind, that's your operation cost. That does not include in your capital cost.
Okay.
Real clear. Okay.
Completely understood.
All right. Any other questions on this particular page?
Any questions out there, Director Gray?
No, thank you very much. I'm listening. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
All right, so moving ahead, we're almost at the end here of this presentation. So slide 36 is your non-operating revenues. Not too much to share here. We're very close to budget. It's good news. It includes your debt, the standby charge, and those fixed revenues that we get from the refineries. So moving on to the following page, we've not shared this historically, so I wanted to put it in there and get some feedback. This is your capital projects. This is the budget we have on an annual basis for all of the capital projects at 45.6 million. I just did a very high level summary for you. So again, the new infrastructure projects, which mainly is the JMM expansion at the Parson facility. There's the rehabilitation and replacement projects. That primarily was purchase of membranes for the barrier and cathodic protection project that's going on. And other projects that includes primarily, there's a lot of little ones, but that's the desalter decommission cost. So those are the areas that we've spent in that actual number there, 4.8 million as compared to a budget for the first quarter of 11.4 million. Of course, the E&O committee shares much more detail on it by project. I just wanted to share an overview with you. And that really concludes my presentation. I'd be happy to answer any questions on that.
Steve, do you want to talk at all about the page 39, the overview report?
So page 39, thank you, Greg. Page 39 is what you historically shared with you, and I wanted to make sure it was included in the budget handout as well. Those numbers that you saw reflected in the presentation all came from these numbers. And I think Margaret highlighted, when you look at the projected for the end of the year, don't be too scared. It's early to tell, but of course we tend to be a little bit more conservative. And so those numbers, as time goes on, of course, we will do updated projections, and the idea is that we'll come back for the December update and have much more updated temporary information for you.
And if I may ask, so the projected debt coverage by the end of the year, we're looking at 1.2.
Yes.
And any commentary around that?
I'm using what I'm seeing today as far as our sales and using that to go move forward with the recycled water sales. I have worked with our operations engineer, Susanna Lee, and we projected out for those numbers. Again, it's just based on what we know today. And, you know, again, I tend to be a little bit more conservative. We're looking at expenses. I want to make sure that I'm showing that we will utilize those dollars that we've planned to utilize. But as Mark pointed out, we may not spend everything in some of the technical planning in other areas, but it's a conservative estimate.
Would 1.2 present any challenges for us, maybe from a credit rating standpoint?
I don't think so. I mean, certainly when the credit rating agencies are looking at us, they look at what you're budgeting for. And so certainly as we budgeted at originally 1.36, you know, that might be some cause for concern. But I will say at the end of the year, you know, there's always some kind of adjustments that come through one way or the other. And again, Marianne is correct. She is conservative. So we do have a great dialogue around that and spend some time on it. But we also understand that, you know, we're 3 months and we're already starting to see things that might be slightly different than we are. And we certainly don't want to give any indication to any project manager out there that we're saying, oh, you're not going to spend your dollars because you're not spending them now. We know most of it's sort of a timing difference. For instance, a lot of costs for water harvest comes in second quarter, not first quarter, you know, that kind of thing. So, and there are things that are sort of a one-time, you know, sort of cost that comes in. So again, I think the mid-year will be a very good tell. And I know that in our conversation with our general manager, we plan on doing that mid-year update once we have a full 6 months worth of data for you. And so usually that will be sort of right after we close. And so we'll probably bring that to you in the February timeframe. And so that's where I think we can have some good dialogue around sort of how are we doing with sales? How are we doing with our expenses? How are we doing with our capital projects? And then that will be a nice lead into our budget development for fiscal year 23-24.
Really fast question. So the water harvest costs, do we get those, when do we hear those numbers? Is that at the upcoming PI committee meeting or?
That dollar amount?
Yeah.
Or
Yeah.
you're talking?
Like how much it cost us, how much we brought in sponsorships, what the,
Sure, what the public information team is willing presents in that area. I know certainly they have other facts that they presented,
Sure.
like how many people showed up and that participation levels. We certainly can check in with Amy on and what she intends to present, and if that's something that you'd like to include, we can.
I would like, I think it'd be good. I think it'd be good for us to see how much did it cost the agency to put on water harvest and how much in sponsorships we got, just so we see where we're at. So whether that's probably would make sense to be presented in the PI update, the wrap up, you know, that.
are paid along the way, but a lot of them, are materializing, right at the very end, which in our case is October. And so certainly we can do that. And yeah, I mean, a lot of times it's a timing difference, and when we are putting our effort forward on certain things. So,
I would ask,
Okay, we will bring that data into the next Public Information Committee meeting.
yeah, so you guys are gonna do a wrap-up update anyway, so you might as well put that in.
Sure, will do.
Makes sense. And one last question is the Brewer Gestalter. I mean, I know that we're still working with WRD and some negotiations, but do you have any, I mean, just a minor update on that? Or we still,
Yeah, so
we have
we're-
not received a check yet,
we-
obviously.
Correct. We have not received the check yet from WRD. I think our approved negotiating position that the board authorized me to continue with was to allow for WRD to withhold some of the 1.5 million for the repair of the pump and motor. And then we would have the balance of that cut as a check to us. The term of the agreement was that there be an agreement between WRD and Cal Water for the property lease. And so that's where it is right now is WRD and Cal Water are working together, their attorneys, to finalize that arrangement. And then once they have that in place, then that box will be checked and then they can continue with the establishing the escrow, placing that funds in there for the O&M and then releasing the remainder of the funds to us.
Great, because I know our committee's not meeting because there really is just not a lot of activity that the committee can do anymore at this moment.
That,
Yeah,
correct.
there's just nothing more, but, and the board authorized you to do what you just said. And I don't know if you put this update into the E&O or not. I didn't read that agenda yet, but I just wanted to ask for us that we know on the finances. So that's where it's at, right? Basically, it's WRD and Cal Water trying to get their agreement.
That's exactly right. They're working on their lease agreement. And once that's cleared, then that'll allow WRD to move forward with the remainder, with their activities. We've done everything that we can do to perform.
Correct.
All of the work has been completed on the Cal Water property itself. We've closed out our permits, things of that nature. And so there is nothing more for West Basin to do.
Correct. Basically. Okay, and I thought that would be good for the committees to know, Director Williams, well, is that's where we're just at. It's that.
Yeah, we can certainly provide an update on in tonight's E&O committee as well on that. I don't know that we,
You said tonight?
this afternoon, I'm sorry.
Thank you.
This afternoon, 4 PM,
The dinner plans are spoiled.
4 PM to 5:30.
All right, good. I have no other questions, but thank you for the update and I know we want to keep things moving. I want to say thank you for I like this PowerPoint report. I think this was
That's
a lot
Margaret's
easier to
idea.
understand than just this one piece of paper. I
Okay,
think that's
good.
really good to get in the weeds a little bit.
Along with her, but I figured this is a new approach that might be
I
appreciated.
think this is
I
really
have a
helpful.
hard time changing, so. When she said you have to put a PowerPoint, I'm like, what? But I'm glad you like it. We'll
Just
continue.
another- I think this was a lot easier for us to digest.
Okay, great. Well, if there's anything that you want to see added, please let me know and I will definitely incorporate that.
Okay, thank you. So let's move on to 6C as in cat, the monthly financial report.
Please, Marianne, continue.
All right, so yes, we have our monthly financial report that we include each month. It keeps you abreast of different things that are moving along and happening in the district. We have the 4 reports included for you today. We'll just start off with the demand list, which starts on page 42 of your packet and goes through page 49. For the month of October, this included all of your payments to cover operating and capital activities. There was a total of 21.5 million for the month. Nothing that I want to point out other than we did have a couple large payments, as I mentioned earlier, capital projects. You'll see on page 47, there was a payment for some membranes that were purchased, and also I believe a payment related to the JMM expansion. So just a couple of large payments in this particular month. But other than that, I'd be happy to answer any questions on the demand list.
Any questions, Director Williams?
No, thank you.
I had a couple of questions. I noticed contract labor with Apple One a couple of times, $2,000 to $3,000 each. What exactly is that for?
I can answer that question. So in preparation for water harvest, the public information team needed to add some additional support.
Okay.
And so they hired it through a temp agency to provide them that support to help put on that production.
Great. Also saw, and I don't know, on that first page, page 42, that Frontier Communications, it says telephone expense for disinfected tertiary. Just thought that was odd. What does that mean? Telephone expense for disinfected?
Oh, so why we sort of identify that there, when it gets charged to a specific process, we try to identify that within our demand list. So it's just probably a line that it's, I would have to look into further what it is, but that we do.
Categorization of some kind, right?
Yeah, so again, that's why you'll see, when we have chemicals, we'll say if it's being used specifically for barrier or whatever the case is. So if it is sort of more direct, if you will, then we identify it, but
I saw here on page 46, we have an oil and grease violation fee of $6,000. And can you explain what that one was? to us?
yeah, I believe actually our through an engineering operations meeting that they did report that discussion, that item to you. I don't remember what month it was, but I do recall that being presented by our department there. Most likely Uzi shared some comments on that. Greg, if you wanted to add it.
That's exactly right, Margaret. Yeah, so there was a detection of oil and grease in a sample grab. I believe it was a discharge line from the facility. And that happened quite some time ago, I think in 2021. And so there was some interaction with the regional board. And I think our assessment of the situation with the regional board was that this was a very modest, very moderate kind of penalty payment. It could have been a lot worse, in other words. And so, we were proactive and cooperative with the regional board, which resulted in this $6,000 penalty.
Okay, but it's from over a year ago.
It was quite some time ago. Yeah, I don't remember the exact date of the sample grab, but it was quite some time ago. And so we've reported this to the board, to the E&O committee on more than one occasion since I've come on board.
Great, all right. And then my only last observation would be, I do see we have quite a bit of maintenance that's been happening at this building, the Donaldale Deer building. So I know that down the road, we are gonna have a board meeting or a workshop on DLD.
Right.
And I think that would be good that you all make sure you include how much has been expended on any of these maintenance items, et cetera, because I do see, some of them are running into the thousands of dollars, and I'm not, you don't have to tell me what these even are right now, but I saw that there's some outlays that we've been putting out, so.
Sure thing. We could certainly provide a summary report of what the maintenance expenditures have been over the past perhaps 12 months.
Probably, or, when you put that workshop together or whatever we end up deciding on, you might just please include that as things have been happening, just so it'll help us again with our decision making. But knowing the cost of maintenance has been happening, because some of these might be things that you just have to do.
Oh, yeah.
Right?
I mean, we had, I think, Julie, we had a recent leak was it just this week or?
Last week.
Last week?
Yeah, we had a pipe burst on the third floor that drained down to the second floor. And then we've also made some repairs on our HVAC system, the boiler, that was completely out. So we had to replace one of the units.
Yeah, so we can certainly provide, kind of a year-to-date summary of expenditures on that. And
Good.
hopefully that'll be helpful for the board to consider. And then I think also we had other expected replacements. I think the elevator has been one of the items. And so those planned replacements haven't gone forward. But it's these kind of emergency response situations that have happened.
Gotcha. Okay. Question?
No, I would just like to add that it's very important that some people don't believe that we need to
Do anything.
do anything.
We have to do this.
Well, I mean, it's a health and safety matter, right? I mean, we have to have a facility that is, occupiable.
Sometimes I don't want to step into the elevator. I step in and I didn't think I weighed that much, but feel the rubber band stretch.
It's a way to put it. Okay, great. Those are all my questions on that register. So thank you very much. Any questions out there, Director Gray?
I'm still here. No, thank you.
All right, we're on the tail end of this. So why don't you go ahead and move forward, Mary Ann?
Thank you. So let's move on to page 50 of your packet. This is your cash and investment report. This is as of October 31st, 2022. As you'll see in the left-hand side, the total market value on the 31st was 65.3 million. That is slightly down from last month. We were at 68.4 million. Again, we're still well diversified. You can see the pie on the right where we have all of our investments. Again, very safe also investments, I'll point out. And then just quickly go through the report. Maybe if we can switch over to page 53. This is your transaction ledger for the month, the buys, the sales, maturities. So did want to point out that at the last item under the purchases, if you recall last month, when we had the discussion with City First, I would want to say Broadway Federal, but City First, we did reinvest with them the $250,000. The good news is it shows 1.25. The bank did let me know just last week that they were able to actually secure 1.5%. So we'll update the report going forward for this next month on that. And I think that's all I have on the cash investments. The remaining pages is just the detail of your portfolio by the type of the investment. So I will pause there to see if you have any questions.
No, thank you.
Yeah, no question. Portion of it.
So we'll move on to your monthly water sales. That's on page 68.
Go ahead.
So at the top of the page, we have our imported water. This is for the retail sales. We did budget 103,200 acre feet for the year. I'm just gonna talk about October and a little bit for the year-to-date numbers, since we did have a pretty in-depth conversation already through September. So October, we did see again lower sales than what we budgeted. We're down about 820 acre feet for the month, or about 8.8% from the budget, and we're also lower than last year at about 7.7%. On a year-to-date basis, trending similarly, we are below budget about 10% and below last year about 10%. And then moving down to the bottom of the page, you have your imported barrier sales. Again, this makes up both the Dominguez Gap injection and the West Coast barrier. We had budgeted 558 for the month. We ended up at 373. Hopefully we'll see that number maybe ramp up a little. I'm not quite sure, depending on how much they're injecting into the West Coast barrier. As we discussed before, when it comes to the Dominguez Gap, we don't have a lot of input in that. That has to do with the county and then how much water they get from LA on that one. So moving on to the next page, page 69 is your recycled water sales. For the month, I could say that it's positive over last year. We're about 900 acre feet over last year. And we're close to budget this month. We're about 120 acre feet less than what we budgeted. So that's good news. In that first table of numbers, we do try to highlight the barrier, the refineries, and disinfected tertiary. And you can see for the barrier, we're just under what we budgeted, but hopefully now that we're kind of back on track and those repairs hopefully are done at the county, with the West Coast barrier, that we'll see those numbers go up. As we mentioned earlier, the refineries are doing well. We'll probably beat budget on that, I'm hoping, with this now with the Chevron nitrified water year of sales there. And then disinfected tertiary, we're down just a little bit for the month, but we are over last year. With that, I'll just pause to see if you have any questions on any of those.
Well, thank you.
So your last report is your director's conference and travel expense. This includes all of your expenses through the month of October. I do understand that it does probably not, it does not include the credit card receipts that we got for the month of October. We didn't have that detail available, but if we do have that information, we'll get that in for the board report. But this does not include those expenses in there. And then the following page, page 71, is your executive management and staff travel expense report. Both are under budget.
Any questions?
So thank you.
Any questions, Director Gray?
Oh, no, thank
There
you.
you are. Okay,
I'm
thank
here.
you. Okay, great, no problem. So with that, we're done with the information calendar. We have no closed session today. Director's comments or future agenda items. I'll start with Director Williams.
Well, thank you.
Okay, Director Gray.
Oh, just thank you to the staff for always giving very comprehensive reports. So thank you very much. Thank you.
Great, thank you. And Director Deere, I know he's muted.
If you're online, Director Deere, you need to hit the *6 to make any comments, to unmute. Star and then the 6.
There he is.
Am I still
Director
muted?
Deere. There you
Yeah.
are. We hear you.
I just want
Go
to echo Director Gray's comments. Excellent report, staff. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Director Deere, and I will say the same. Thank you. We just have our 2 staff in here, Margaret and Mary Ann, but thank you very much. I think these are really thorough reports, and as I said, I really like this new format you provided us for the budget update, so thank you. We gave you some action items for the next committee meeting, as well as the PI committee and any board items that we're going to move forward at the end of the month. So it says here that our next scheduled meeting will be December 14th, 2022, although I have asked our board secretary and general manager to look at new dates because of CRUA, because I plan to go to CRUA. So I will look at some new dates, probably the week prior if we can do it. But they'll work with us and you to figure that out, because then we have our December board meeting is quicker than normal.
The 19th.
Yeah, so we have an extremely crammed schedule in December. So with that, this actually probably will not likely be accurate, but anyway, you all will worry about that and figure it out with us and the chair. And with that, we are adjourned.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, Director
Thank you.
Deere
Thank
and
you,
Director
Sam.
Gray.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Take care.